who wants to understand why somebody in Rajasthan is not going to school, or why somebody in Andhra is not accessing healthcare, or why somebody in Bengal doesn't understand that they don't need to pay for access for getting an Aadhaar card. If these were real life questions that researchers could help others answer, that would be brilliant, right?
Hello and welcome to the Anahita Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Prerna Mukharya, the founder of Outline India, a for-profit social enterprise that works to create social impact through data. With a focus on collecting primary data and enabling partners to track change, measure and grow impact, Outline India has worked across 29 states and union territories, covering 50,000 plus villages with over 5.5 million stakeholders across India and a few countries. Prerna is a Chevening Scholar at Oxford University and a Raisina Fellow, awarded by the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Prerna, we are very pleased to have you with us today.
Very happy to be here, Trevor. Thank you.
So, starting with the first question, Prerna, what inspired you to start Outline India and how did you develop your vision for the organization? Can you please tell us about your early journey?
Okay. So I think, Sadak, this is something I tell a lot of young professionals. It's probably a story that's more lackluster than one might expect. But I didn't have a brainwave one day, or it was no spotlight moment. I'd been a researcher prior to this. So I was in India, I studied economics, and I went to the US, I studied some more economics. And then at that point, I realized that I don't want to do a corporate job when I was in Boston. And I said, Acha, don't want to do a PhD either. And, that's something that actually my mother gives me a lot of flack about, because I've done so much research over the last couple of years. I might as well have, done two PhDs. So I've done lots of research for other people, but not a PhD. And so, I started working as a researcher for other professors back in the US. So I crossed the river from Boston University, and I was with two professors at Howard and MIT, and I did some very interesting stuff. And it was really in my time working as an RA that for one of these professors, I was actually researching India and railways and correlations to climate and all of that. And some of it was very interesting. And then I'm like, Acha, I'm studying India, sitting across the ocean. It might be fun to go back home and see what research really looks like, see research in its most applied form. So I came back to India. This was 2010, Shatak. And again, I applied for a bunch of research jobs. I also liked the idea of business research. So I applied to be a journalist in a bunch of places. And I got hired by a few TV channels. So that was the other side of me. But then this research job came my way from the Center for Policy Research. It was a big IPA JPAL grant, and super PI on that assignment was Michael Kremer, who later received his Nobel for work in economics. And it was really that job, Satak, that taught me everything I know to this day. Being a city girl living in Delhi, it can be very easy to forget, or it can be very easy to be trapped in a bubble, assuming that your life is representative of India, that your life or your everyday is representative of the life of the superset. But that is a massive misconception. Right? You drive down 45 minutes from Gurgaon, and reality changes in a big way, right? And when I say reality changes, Shraddha, what I really mean is, quality of healthcare changes. You walk into a school and you will see girls sitting on one side and boys sitting on one side. The conversation changes, the expectation from life changes. how you perceive space and time changes, right? So, for instance, if you ask somebody in a rural area how far something is, they'll always say, "Oh, it's just like 10 minutes away. You know, you go straight, turn left, turn right, it's right there." And you're driving for 2.5 hours, and you're like, "Acha, how is that possible?" Or you ask someone how old they are, and they will not know, right? Even to this day in this country, people do not know their birthdays, right? In fact, I mean, my mother has a different birthday, and then her passport states something else, right? So we still come from a country where parents did not really note down their birthdays, right? So I remember being in the field once and asking an old woman what her age was, and she said 19. So my point is, right, realities change as you drive down a couple of kilometers, spend a couple of minutes away from the city areas we also dearly call home, people like you and I. And it was really in my time at the Center for Policy Research, that I had a chance to get out of the offices. We did a lot of field work, Shata. We were on the ground, we did a lot of data collection. And it was really in my time there that I realized that there might be a massive business opportunity here, right? And back in the day, 10 years ago, people thought that doing social research was not very cool, and you had the same set of companies doing market research and the same set of companies doing social research, and that the story just didn't add up to someone like me, right? And I thought, okay, what if researchers, people like you and I, people who love the idea of policy, people who love the idea of data, people who love the idea of creating change, what if they were to be sitting on the other side of the table, right? What if they were helping others who were looking to create change, philanthropists, not-for-profits, think tanks, universities, anybody looking to create social value on the ground? What if there was this one company that could be the ears and eyes on the ground? And I say ears and eyes on the ground for a very specific reason, right? A lot of these PIs or principal investigators, a lot of these researchers, or a lot of these philanthropists, at least back in the day, were sitting across the ocean. Now, again, that's a piece that's changed. You have a lot of money coming in from India. You have a lot of people wanting to give back. There's a big push towards creating systemic change, etc., etc. But I think that was the story a little bit back then. And 2 years into my research job, while my other colleagues or the other RAs went on to the Kennedys and the other big schools to do their PhDs and second masters, I broke away from the pack and I set up Outline India. And it was a very simple motivation, a very simple piece of thinking behind it, that what if tomorrow you, Shatak, who wants to understand why somebody in Rajasthan is not going to school, or why somebody in Andhra is not accessing healthcare, or why somebody in Bengal doesn't understand that they don't need to pay for access for getting an Aadhaar card. If these were real life questions that researchers could help others answer, that would be brilliant, right? Um, and again, I also wanted to be very practical about it, Sadak. I think uh, I received a lot of flack back in the day that how can you claim to be setting up an impact driven company when you're for profit? So, how can you be making money and say, listen, I'm here to do good? And a lot of people encouraged me to also set up a Section 8 company at that time, but I did not. So I was resolute about the fact that the development sector, we're out there to do good, but incentives matter, right? Sure, at some level, maybe the payouts may not be comparable to a consultancy firm or an investment banker, but they need not be, right? Whoever comes into this sector acknowledges and understands that the orientation is different, the expectation is different, but I think they're still deserving of a good life. So I thought, we're going to set up a company that does a good job, that's willing to get down and get dirty. And by that, I mean field work, and I'll talk more about that. But also, that they will get paid, that they'll still be, able to afford a good life, but they go to bed feeling very happy because they've done a good job at the end of it all.
Yeah, thank you very much for that elaborate answer, Prerna. From what I understand, it's a mix of both for you during 2010 to 2011. It's sensitization of the realities beyond the urban landscape, especially in India, also with a business understanding of how things may click. I mean, it's because even if you were very motivated to do it, you needed a group of people to be motivated as much as you do, and you realize that the incentive factor is pretty important. I think that's a very niche space at this point of time, but in 2010, I think that would have been an even more niche space. Moving on to the next question, it is why and how is data and its collection methodologies important in today's time? How does data connect to public policy making?
Um, Again, very, very simple answers, Shatak. Now, think of uh, before you deploy a social scheme, or if you've already been running a social program, or if you're a philanthropist who wants to, work on adult literacy in Rajasthan, where do you start, right? Uh, let's pick this specific example up, right? That I want to work in Ajmer, Rajasthan, and I want to work on the problem of adult literacy. I've identified the location. Let's say I come from Ajmer and I want to give back to the community. I'm a funder or I'm a philanthropist and I've got X amount of money. Um, how will I really go about trying to change the numbers or shift the needle in the right direction? Let's say I sit down and identify macro goals and micro goals. Let's say my macro goals are, cut down adult literacy issues by 2 percentage points. And let's say my micro goals are target people in the age groups of 40 to 55. And let's say another micro goal is also ensure that, maybe 30% of those stakeholders I'm working with are women. So there's some gender parity that we're working towards, right? How do you then really go about solving this problem, right? What is the kind of social programming that's needed? What are the kind of workshops should you do? What is the kind of behavioral change that's needed? Should you have people, teachers going in and holding classes every day, or should there be a little theater group that visits these villages and tells people about the benefits of learning and education even at a late age? Or should there be a campaign that talks to people that don't go to money lenders because you can't do your calculation, you have no numeracy skills, so come to our little camp, come for 20 days, come for 2 months, this is what you learn, this is your takeaway, right? So what is the kind of strategy you need to deploy to be able to achieve your goal? It's very simple. It can almost be like a cricket match, or it can be having an end goal in sight and then finding a way to get to that end goal. You need data, you need information off the ground, right? And not in all cases will you find secondary data sets. Sure, you'll find maybe someone else at some point did some intervention, or maybe someone else at some point collected some data, but for different reasons you'll want to understand what these specific stakeholders are thinking in these 10 blocks in this one district in Rajasthan. So you will need primary data, and fortunately or unfortunately, even though present day the reach of the internet has grown substantially, mobile phones have penetrated far and wide, but we'd all be surprised at what the real numbers look like. Even today, Shatak, about 65% of India, lives in its villages, and about 70% of those people don't access the internet, right? And if I'm not coming online, there is one way and one way alone of figuring out what these people need and what these people want. And that one way is striking a conversation with them, right? So you've got to get out of your offices, go talk to them, get some data in, perhaps go back and collect some more data, analyze that data, figure out 1, 2, 3 policy programs that might work, test them out, and then launch them at scale. And that is why primary data today, and primary data at least for the next couple of years, will be super critical. You need to know what ticks people off, right? And I think this is widely researched, and there's lots of memes around it that one of the basic tenets of economics is so flawed that human beings are rational. Human beings are not rational, right? We are driven by emotion. We're driven by so many things. And that is why 2 plus 2 is not always 4 when it comes to policy making. It might be 120. And that's why primary data is important.
Thanks a lot, Prerna. That's a very elaborate primer on people who do not know exactly why primary data is important for social welfare schemes and generally for any welfare state. My next question, I'm going to precede my next question with an observation, is that a common man would assume that this role of collection of data primarily relies with the state. That would be an assumption, no matter how many flaws that assumption may have. For example, there was a socio-economic caste census in 2011. Of course, there's the decadal census which we have, and of course, that's not completely reliable. That's why we have people like you. So, could you please tell us where exactly is the baseline of data on top of which you can work? This is, of course, the assumption that you don't need to redo it. So, where do you start that work on top of the government's data, and how frequent are the instances where you think the government's primary data itself is not reliable, especially the most popular ones, such as the census data?
Sure. So I think first of all, this is a very good question, but I have a twofold response to that. One is, I'm going to start with the census data. Now, India is a massive country. We're an ocean, right? And sadly, I mean, even present day, we're still using 2011 census data as researchers. So I don't need to discuss the drawbacks of using a data set from 2011, because it was collected even before that. If it was published in 2011, so it was collected obviously a little bit before that, right? So you're talking about using a data set that's 10, 12, 13 years old, right? So that's obviously problematic for different reasons. There's been a shift in thinking, culture, context, growth in population, boundaries have changed, so much has changed. So that's one. The second is, I will not poke holes at the primary data that is collected by the government. I will actually um, concede that there's a lot of good work that's being done by the government, especially when it comes to primary data. I think it's more of a problem of compilation and packaging that data that would perhaps render it more usable for policy purposes. So, for instance, today, let's say it's a data set on adolescent health. You will have the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare building that data. You will perhaps have, so that's at the center. You will have the state government building its own data. Then you will also have somebody at the district level collecting their own data. But these data sets will not speak to each other, right? And that's an obvious problem. But I think the good news is that for different reasons, it has now been ingrained, or now people legit believe that you do need to collect data regularly. You do need to put it out in the public domain. It definitely has to be in a usable, downloadable Excel format, right? How it's compiled and collated, these are all things that we'll eventually find a way to clean up and clean out. So no grievances there, right? In fact, I mean, I want to go a step further and show appreciation for the kind of data sets that are now collected by ASHAs, who are the healthcare workers, right? They've been given mobile phones by the government of India. And if you look at the interface, it is so impressive. You can choose the language, and then you submit data on, did was midday meal prepared? Oh, what did you prepare? How many kids came? How many girls came? What is the attendance? Da, da, da. It is so impressive how easy some of this, has become. And obviously, a lot of this information is being put out into the public domain. As a policy researcher, Shatak, as somebody in the domain, it took me a few years, or at least 2 3 years, to understand this. We need our not-for-profits, we need our funds, we need our philanthropists, we need our universities and our researchers. But to create large-scale, systemic, sustainable, effective change, you've got to work from within the system. You've got to have the government on board, right? Because otherwise, Prerna, as part of some fund or some trust, goes in, builds out this beautiful program. Let's say the number of issues are few, and then I'm like, okay, this is working. 2 years later, I step out. 3 years later, I step out, and I leave the model to its own device. And I'm hoping that everybody continues to behave in a certain way. But unless I pump in more money, unless there is legit monitoring, unless somebody's continuously tracking that data, and there is some sort of a feedback going in from the organization to the stakeholders, why will they continue to to behave that way, right? The one way to ensure that is by having policy people being in on this ecosystem, right? And I think again that started happening in such a big way. You will see organizations such as mine or other organizations, they have these long-standing MOUs with the government, or they have these, or today many of us, including me, we're part of these roundtables, with DMEO, or with other bodies within the government, wherein they're seeking us out to figure out what to do next. So those walls have come down. The lines have become a little bit hazy, but all in good spirit. Back to you, please.
Thanks, Prerna. That's a wonderful answer, and it's great to hear that the opportunity is there. It looks positive for younger minds to step into the landscape. A follow-up question is that clearly we have some funding, we have some infrastructure, and the government has done its part by introducing the India Stack, including Aadhaar, digital ID systems, which plug and play in here and there, which may help you. My question is, you are obviously an expert, but we would need a very large set of human resources to work on it, people like you. So what exactly is the skill set needed by that human resource pool to capture the gap which exists in collection of primary data? If someone wants to be you in 5 6 years, especially in this context of India, government doing something, private sector doing something, opportunity is there. So what are the skill set you would like to highlight? Because only researching at the desk is not enough, and also going to the field by itself is not enough. So what should be the outlook of a young person who wants to be you in, let's say, 5 years?
Um, So I think the good news is that earlier when I was asked this question, Shatak, 10 years ago, I would always say, oh, go into the social sciences, study economics, study statistics. But I think we've come a long way from there, right? Today, outside this room, I have colleagues sitting, somebody who's a lawyer and she works on communication for us. I have somebody who's a journalist who's helping us with partnerships. I have somebody who's got a master's in public health who's looking at data for us. I have somebody who did a master's in economics, then did an MBA, and looks at these data sets for us. So the point I'm trying to hit home is that uh, the policy sector needs sociologists, anthropologists, economists, statisticians, um, and perhaps most importantly, willing parties, right? Of course, numeracy skills or good coding skills, whether it's a statistical software or whether such as Stata, or these days everybody wants to look at R and Python. So people are taking a lot of courses. My only advice to a lot of young professionals is, um, just taking these courses off of the internet is not enough. You've got to put those skills in practice. So whether it's you taking up side gigs or taking up internships or working at organizations, it is extremely important that you put your skills to good use, right? And I see this so often, Shada. We get candidates who've got PhDs, but when we, ask them to look at data sets, they cannot, even though they have the technical skills, because they've never worked on a primary data set. They've only looked at secondary data sets, clean data sets. So they don't even know how to clean that data set up. And I think all of these skills only come once you work somewhere, whether it's at a university, whether it's at a startup, whether it's an organization such as ours. And it's just a number side of things, right? There's a whole realm of research which requires good writing skills, good qualitative skills. You need ethnographers, and again, we have people from all these walks of life. I mean, I have somebody who worked as a chemist for 7 years at a factory, and then she joined us, and she did a lot of grunge work for 6 months. She did transcriptions, and she just looked at data, and she just did a bit of writing for us, and now she's one of our stronger people. And that's because she said, listen, Prerna, I want to work in the dev sector. I think you guys do a good job, and I think I can add value. And we gave her a shot, and I think 3 years hence it's worked out so beautifully, right? So of course, coming from the social sciences is great, but if you're an engineer, you're a lawyer, you're a journalist, I think the dev sector or the social sector needs it all, right?
Thank you so much. So I see two parts to it. One is you can unpack and decipher what is needed, but what is more important, secondly, is deep conviction and first-hand experience, which always helps in any profession. We'll move on to other themes of question. The next question is, what role does technology play in your work, and how are you leveraging digital tools and platforms to create impact and drive change?
Um, uh, Again, I think technology is important, Shatak, because, and this is something that I think all of us realized more so during the pandemic, that we collect data on the ground, we do surveys. We could not deploy people during the pandemic, right? Mostly we couldn't. We actually did a lot of healthcare COVID-centric research work wherein our people still went out into the field and collected data. So there's a lot of COVID, healthcare, migration-related work where our people still went out that we did. But in principle, COVID made us realize that sure, research might suffer a little bit here and there, but we've got to find alternate solutions. So I think uh, digital tools are extremely important. So for instance, now we steer clear of paper-based data collection. Over the last 10 years, I think we've not really done too many paper-based data collection exercises. So of course, there's lots of digital data collection tools that we use. But I think internally at Outline India, we've also developed this new software. It's called Pulse, and Shata, we named it Pulse because we thought it will help us understand people's pulse, or it will help us understand what people are thinking, right? And it's a very cool model. It enables us to bring on board gig workers. So Shatak, who's probably working at a shop in some place near Bhopal, he gets off work at 4 p.m., but he wants to make some side money. He can log on to the platform, and if he's with a vendor and the vendors bid for a data collection bid, then Shatak can be assigned 5 surveys to do. Each survey is going to be 15 minutes long, and you get some quick data points in. And our larger goal with Pulse really here is that can we cut the turnaround time for data collection? Can we, uh, cut the cost substantially and roll out quick and dirty surveys, but have some quality measures in place? And the answer to all these four things is yes, because we've been able to cut costs by 1/20th. We can give you as many data points as you want. So, for instance, if you come to us and say, Prerna, you want 1,000 data points in Kochi in 48 hours, and we want, we'll put it up as a data collection gig on the platform. We'll have vendors coming and bidding for it. They'll each be assigned, say, they each bring in 10 people. Each of those 10 people does 10 surveys a day. So that's 10 into 10, 100. 10 days it's all done. Or if you have 10 of those vendors, it's all done in a day. So, the basic math works out in that fashion, right? And what it's really doing is ensuring that people don't have to travel long distances. We're giving you 100% audio recordings. It obviously has one limitation that we can't do very deep or in-depth surveys, because these are gig workers at the end of the day, so they will have limited understanding. But it's mitigating a big problem, right? Which is that on a lot of days when you want data off the ground, you simply go ahead and use guesstimates, right? And those guesstimates may or may not be accurate. So our tech piece is helping solve that problem in a big way. But of course, even other than that, I think present day you've got Google Data Studio, you've got a lot of organizations are using Power BI to visualize and go from there, right? My stand on this is, one wherein I say technology in the social sector is an enabler. It will enable you to create change. It will enable you to do a good job. I don't think it can ever be the focus, right? Because it's at the end of the day, it's a human being that you're looking at. Each cell of a data set that you're looking at, is not some random thing that happens somewhere. Um, it's the opinion of an individual. It could be a young mother telling you about what issues she had when she was pregnant, or it could be a child telling you about the problems of child labor in a certain location, or it could be an old woman telling you she can't access her pension, right? So these are very real stories of people, and you've got to look at these data sets in that light.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you stole my thought there. I was also thinking that technology is an enabler, more of an enabler than like doing the last mile thing. You will always need human beings to take the last call, take the subjective call. The emotional intelligence is lacking in most technologies. although we do have new emerging technologies such as generative AI, and there are huge amounts of debate and a lot of opinions on it, on how it can not, if not replace, so how much of our work can they do. My follow-up question is slightly technical. It is in terms of your organization's access to technology. Some technologies are open source, some are proprietary, and given the use cases you want to develop, such as Pulse, where are you in terms of access to technologies? Are you happy with the repository of technology out there in India? And otherwise, is there any challenge in accessing that technologies in terms of funding or resources? Or do you think enough is there outside? Whenever you want, you can have that technology. Given this question is basically linked to the huge rise of technologies and new emerging technologies. So, what is your organization's relation with technology
So
in
I
terms
think
of access?
so. Shadak, I think when we talk about generative AI and everything, so this body of intelligence that currently exists is based on internet usage and opinions and need of internet users, right? And right there, you're not talking about the superset of India. You're not talking about millions of those kids. And, like I said, if you go into rural India, there'll be perhaps one phone at the household level, and it's typically the male who has it, right? And women will access it maybe for calling, but are they really using the internet? So maybe in a way, when we talk about generative AI or these algorithms, we haven't really taught these algorithms much about rural needs and wants and issues. And that's simply because the subpopulation or the superpopulation do not use internet in the same way, shape, and form. Sure, people will start using Instagram to put up reels, or people are definitely using WhatsApp to send good mornings. But are they really using the internet to figure out, what cropping pattern suits their the climate, and what they should be growing on their farmland? No, not so much, right? A lot of that is still done very hands-on, and information is disseminated locally. And of course, a lot of this is going online, so it's all steps in the right direction. So I am not critical, but I want to be very realistic about how these technologies will cater to these, not subsets, supersets. We're far removed from them catering to the needs of these, the superset of India. And a majority of our work, or a majority of the work that organizations such as Outline India do, caters to them, right? So we're not there yet. So from that standpoint, your question becomes a little bit moot.
Yeah, thank you for contextualizing the access to technologies and the technological development. Much of it depends on who are there visible digitally in the first place. I think before we close the discussion, we would just want to know more of your personal journey. So let's frame the question as you've of course told us about certain examples of work which you've done. Can you highlight any example in the past which has brought about a personal development for you? Anything which has been kind of breakthrough or taught you certain lessons of life which has helped you move forward? Any particular example, somewhere you've gone, something you've seen?
So I think some very happy stories, Shatak, and some slightly sad stories, right? So my point is, you can go on a field mission or a data collection assignment, but you always come back a changed person, and that's again simply because of the interactions you have. You might forget a day in the office, or you might forget, if I asked you, oh, what were you doing in February, you may not be able to piece together those 28, 29 days. But if I asked you, listen, how do you remember that field experience from 2019? Trust me, you will remember where you went. You may not remember the name of the village, or you may not remember the name of the district, but you will definitely have a sense of the conversations you have. When you look at those photographs that were taken in the field, they will bring back some very fond memories, right? So for instance, just 5 weeks ago, I was in Jharkhand, and I was actually exploring something very sensitive. It's centered around the exploitation of labor. It was about children working in certain difficult capacities, and again, IP reasons. I'm not going to get into specifics, but uh, I had the misfortune or the fortune, to see up close and personal that a lot of things we take for granted on a daily basis cannot be taken for granted by so many people around us, right? And I was sitting with this not-for-profit Shatak, and she called these women in to have this conversation with me about what's really happening on the ground, what's happening, where do people earn their wages from, what are the other job opportunities available. And there were these young girls, 28 years old, they looked much older. They all had kids who were almost 14, 15, and they had traveled 2-3 hours just to come talk to me, just to tell us about what was happening on the ground. So a lot of it can be very heartwarming, right? And you're like, oh my god. And when you walk into a room with them, they will not even want to sit down as you sit, and they assume that you're superior because you're from the city, or they will assume because you can speak English, you know better. And none of that is true. I may not know better, I may not be a better human being, right? But then there is this beautiful expectation, Shatak, and that stays uniform across field missions, that there's this beautiful expectation that Prerna or whoever's coming from wherever, your Delhi team or wherever you're coming in from, the information that they share with you, however personal, however disappointing, or however happy, you will be able to take that information and take it to the right set of people who will then take a set of actions or a set of decisions which will change their life in a positive way, right? So in spite of all the madness, in spite of all the hardships, hope can be a wonderful thing, and it's amazing what and this is one of my fondest learnings from working in the field for about a decade, other that it is amazing what people who don't know you would be willing to tell you, just in a couple of minutes, if you just go talk to them, if you hit the right chord, if you sit down with them, if you accord them a certain amount of respect, it can be shocking what people will be willing to share and how open and willing they are to welcome you into their lives. And I think that's the biggest perk of this job, right? And on most days, I think we try and do that as an organization, we try and do that as individuals. But of course, it's never 10 on 10. But I think, like I said, I think 10 years running Outline India, and I'm sitting with a bunch of friends, out, or I'm having at a party or at a birthday, and more often than not, your friends will have this conversation, ki, oh, guys, this job, oh, this boss, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know, where I'm headed in life, or oh, should I switch, or oh, should I go study, etc., etc. The one good thing is I don't associate with those conversations, because this is one piece that I've had very clear in my life. I'm extremely happy about the kind of work we do. And no matter what might go wrong at work, and running a company can be difficult, and you have your good days and your bad days. And like I said, some of this work can open up the Pandora's box of horror to you on a lot of days. We've seen 15-year-old kids, 15-year-old girls who are mothers. We've seen issues of domestic violence, or we've seen people who've not been able to access healthcare, or we've seen quacks acting as doctors. So I once came across this painter who would work in the city as a painter in the summers and as a doctor in the winters, right? So all these kind of stories, they all come together. But I think I go to bed a very happy person, because I know that on most days we're moving the needle in the right direction just a little bit, and that's a great feeling. And I think my is like that as well.
Thanks, Prerna. You're definitely driving impact and change, and I'm sure it must be very challenging, especially on the emotional side. You're not working at a desk all the time. You're out there speaking to people, especially the unheard. And it's great to have someone who's had the best education and had the urban life, and go and interact with these people, and most importantly, link that experience to policy change. With that, we'll come to an end to our conversations. Thank you very much, Prerna. Especially for me, it's been a great learning experience. I'm sure for the audience also, we hope they enjoyed the conversation. Do tune into Carnegie India's YouTube channel for more such content. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaba. Thank you so much, everybody.